Hi, and welcome to Cycling Weekly's Facebook Live broadcast in association with Cycle SOS. I'm Oliver Bridgewood and this is James Bracey, and we're here at Look Mum No Hands in London to try and fix some of your common cycling malfunctions and mechanicals that you encounter while commuting on your bikes. So we're doing free bike maintenance checks, and we've actually got Egil here, who's brought his bike along, and we're going to take a look at it and see if we can fix things. So James, you've taken a look.
Yeah, so we've taken a little look at the bike, and as we know, this is a bike that you use every day, a 10-mile commute every single day.
Yeah, 10 miles forward, 10 miles back.
Yeah, so it's quite a long day. And it's taken some abuse. Same as any bike that you'd use for sort of commuting. And so it's got a few issues that we've noticed so far, but the first thing you obviously want to sort of check out are those safety sort of things. So first thing we had a problem with was the rear brake. Often in the winter, where you're in sort of salty, mucky conditions, the rear brakes can seize, and this is often a common problem. And what you'll find is when you sort of pull the brake, it just doesn't release. You end up having to like take the cable and pull it and everything. And if you leave it too long, as we know, you can get to a point where you can't get it back working as it should be. So you have to end up replacing the part. Now we've actually had to replace the part on Egil's bike here for a new brake. So now we actually have a brake that's working. But one thing that you can do from now on is obviously when you know you've been out riding in those mucky conditions, just to give it a quick sort of wipe over and potentially use like a spray lube or something just to disperse any water, so we can allow this brake to work as it should do for forever and to maintain that regularity.
So are there any other problems that you've had with your bike, Egil?
No, the brake problem James already told about, and also a problem with little gear switching, but
so
as the rest,
you've had a problem with the gear shifting at the front.
Yeah, sure.
Here. So James, what's likely to have gone on there?
So again, when we commute, the gear mechanisms do tend to get really clogged up, and again, we all do it when we're riding a bike. We've got it in. The last thing you want to do is actually clean your bike, so you leave it, then add a bit more oil to your chain, and before you know it, what happens is you try and shift gear, and this mechanism doesn't work. It just stays in place. And so, as you've been doing, you just have left it in that place.
Yeah.
And
admit I was doing that. Wasn't doing what I was supposed to do.
Yeah, and then what happens is the longer it's left in that position, it seizes. So what we've had to do here is just using a little bit of like sort of just multi-purpose spray. You can just spray the actual offended item and leave it either as it is, or what I suggest you try and do is shift the gear so it kind of like releases the tension on that cable, and then you can just really wiggle it and work it until you can effectively, or should be able to actually get it to free up again. And that's exactly what we've done now. So,
thanks, got some great tips to do in future.
Now we've actually got it, so it's shifting again, so you can actually get up the hills. So even though obviously there's not that many hills there. So we've got those as the two main problems. There were a few other little bits, weren't there, that you were concerned about. We sort of talked about the wheels and the tyres as well. That was one of the other things.
No, but just small.
They're working fine, as we know, but as you sort of pointed out, the rim on your bike is actually sort of quite worn. So what you can feel on here is over time, the more you use your brakes, the more it wears your rim out with a standard rim brake here.
Especially in bad weather, when the roads are really dirty like they have been recently.
Sand and dust and dirt.
And so what we'll find is if you actually sort of feel your rim, it should be sort of like effectively a flat side, so just two flat sides like this.
Which is not anymore
you can feel
now.
That the shape on that, Oliver, what would you sort of say the shape is on that now?
Very concave.
So rather than being sort of straight, it's kind of like curves in like this.
Just living its last days now before replacement.
And so the one thing you will find if you leave too long, what tends to happen is your tyre pressure can actually effectively expand those rims out, and over time it could actually break that. Now that can fail catastrophically. We're not saying that's going to happen now. We should be absolutely fine here, but it's something that we would recommend if it gets very badly worn, that it's something you should look to replace that. Obviously, if you're unsure, then you can go to a bike shop or obviously sort of ask somebody that maybe knows a bit more about that.
Definitely will use my cycle to work voucher, which is a great
plan.
Yes, absolutely.
Plan,
You know, as I said, like a bike that you use to commute all the time is a very reliable thing, and it's something you need to have a reliance on. And so obviously making sure that these little things, little tips like that, can actually sort of like help maintain your bike, actually help your bike actually sort of continue to work as long as you want it to.
So now we've sorted these problems on Eggle's bike. I mean, is it good to go now? Is he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Send him on his way?
Yes, we can send him on his way.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Yes.
Right, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So.
Right. Well, I'll come round here. Yep. Nice to meet you, and thanks for your
another bike.
Bringing a bike, yeah. So we've got another bike lined up, but this is Facebook Live. So if you're in the area and you can quickly nip down, then we might be able to have a look at your bike as well. So it's free. So why not come down? But in the meantime, let's get this second bike we've got in the stand. So James, what are some of the other sort of most common things that we need to look out for and commuters might have problems with on their bikes?
So what we really looked for is basically about 5 different areas of the bike that really are of concern to commuters and actually any cyclist really. The first thing we really want to sort of start looking at are your tyres and your wheels really. So the tyres are probably the most important thing. Without these, you just can't go anywhere, can you? So there's a few things you really want to check first of all, and fundamentally it's your tyre pressure.
Yeah.
So tyre pressure has a huge impact on your bike and how it rides. So
you see a lot of commuters, it's quite common, isn't it? Their tyre pressure's too low.
Yeah, you know, you see it. You see people riding along, bouncing up and down, and that tyre looks really flat. Now, there's several reasons why that's not a good thing. First of all, without a shadow of a doubt, it's just not efficient.
Right.
You know, if you're riding and you're riding miles every day, what you'll find is that's going to take you longer to do it. It's going to be heavier going, harder going, and it's just not fun. But the other thing about it as well is it's going to cause you more problems. So punctures, you know, you hit a pothole with an underinflated tyre, and chances are you'll end up with a puncture. So that's a real big thing and a real big issue that you can have with that.
So how do you know if your tyres are underinflated? It sounds like an obvious, but how do you know if your tyres don't have the right pressure?
Well, simply, you know, on a road bike like this, what you can do is you can basically sort of like just do a little thumb test. So if you use your thumbs, you can actually push it down, and you can see on here that I can actually quite easily sort of deflect that tyre. So at the moment, there's not enough air pressure in there. Now, ideally, you really want to try a pump. You know, use a pump with a gauge, and that will give you a real sort of good idea as to what sort of pressures you require on that.
So that's easily done. Just pump up your tyres.
Absolutely, pump the tyres up. If you're not sure, what you'll find on the side of your tyre, normally printed, is the actual sort of tyre pressure or the recommended tyre pressures on there. So when you've got a recommended tyre pressure, you can start off by actually sort of like pumping it to quite close to that high recommended. Okay.
So what's the next thing? Cheers, Eggle. What's the next thing that we should look for? The next most common thing?
So riding a bike in and around sort of traffic, one of the biggest sort of issues in terms of your safety are obviously your brakes. So brake pads. That's a real big thing that we need to be sort of considering on here.
So by brake pads, you're talking about this specific part here?
Yes. So this area here, this is the part that actually touches the rim and slows you down.
And how can we tell when that needs replacing?
So there's a couple of things to look for on here. So the real thing is most of them have like a wear gauge, and most of them actually have an actual thickness that they should be. So what you're looking for is if you've got a full sort of rubber pad, it should actually be sort of almost like where there's little grooves. You should be able to see the grooves on it. Okay. If you can't see grooves, it's worn down.
Okay.
The other type are the ones with a metal holder. So with these, it's much easier to actually sort of work out whether these are worn down, because obviously if that rubber part is actually getting quite close to the metal holder, then again that can cause you sort of significant
So how
problems.
do we fix this then? If you find you need to change your pads, how do we do that? How can someone at home, or who isn't a very good competent bike mechanic, how can they do it?
Well, you can obviously sort of take it to a bike shop. If you're not sure with something to do with your safety, then I would always recommend you sort of go to a bike shop. Like Mum No Hands, where we are right now. You know, they will actually be able to actually check it for you. So it might not necessarily need replacement, but at least they can actually sort of check it for you. But secondly, it's normally a very simple system to do. On a bike like this with a replaceable complete pad, it's just a question of using this little Allen key here to actually remove the pads and replace it with a like-for-like replacement. So you only really need like a little multi-tool. So most people should have one of these. And then normally it's a 4mm. What you can then do is just adjust, and as you can see, very easy, that will then move out. So you want to take that out. Be careful that you keep all of the spacers in the same sort of position when you go to put the next one on. But then obviously you can actually adjust it then to fit the rim.
And also it's important not to put your pads on so that they're touching the tyre as well, because people sometimes put them on and they're rubbing against the tyre, and then that can burst your tyre, can't it, over time? So
Absolutely. A really simple little tip that you can actually do on this is, if you want to adjust them, is basically if you hold your brake, so you pull your brake on, that will actually hold the brake pads next to the rim itself, and allow you to actually just do little adjustments like this, and actually make sure that they're actually in the right place. So they're touching the metal part and they cannot touch the tyre. So it's really important that they don't touch the tyre, for obvious reasons.
I think another thing that people sometimes have is that their brakes are too loose. So maybe their pads have worn down, the brakes got a bit wider, or the cable has stretched a bit. But what sort of normally causes that with the cable?
So what tends to happen, obviously, as you sort of pull the brake, over time that will stretch the cable. So as you said, or you might have that so where the brake pads are actually worn, and so what will happen is you try and pull the brake lever will go back to the bars and you won't stop. And as we know, stopping is quite an important thing, really, isn't it? So a simple way we can actually adjust this, again, using your trusty Allen keys. If you use your free hands to squeeze the brakes against the rim, like so, that effectively takes the tension off the cable. So what you can then do is, this little Allen key nut here holds the cable in place. So you can then loosen this part here and just pull the cable through until it just takes up that little bit of slack. Tighten it back up again. And what you should then have is you should have a brake that starts actually working as it should do. Now, obviously you can pull it too tight. And the last thing we want to do is actually have it where it's touching the brake or touching the rim, because obviously, you know, that can cause you a few problems. That's going to be hard going, isn't it, if we sort of do it like that? So you can then obviously just adjust it a little bit to release that tension and get it working.
And you've got
properly.
this cam lever as well that you can use to open it and close it a little bit as well.
So most people use this really to take out the wheel. So if you release that, it opens the brake and allows you to take the wheel out easily without sort of gripping on the tyre. You can use it to adjust the brake, but I would really recommend that any adjustments do come from that brake cable here. There is a little barrel adjuster that you tend to have on your brake cable. So if you don't have a tool with you and you want to tighten up your brake, you can adjust that.
Just simply turn that.
Simply turn
and
that
most
lever.
brakes have that on as well, don't they?
Most brakes will have that on there, and you should be able to tighten that, and that will actually allow you to tighten the brake.
Cool. So you've worked as a mechanic for a long time. What's another really common problem that you see with people's bikes, and especially on commuters' bikes?
So one thing is, it's something that most people won't even think about, but it's to do with this part of the bike here.
Okay.
So what you've got here is your headset. So these are the bearings that allow you to actually sort of steer and allow the bike to sort of steer nice and smoothly. So you have two bearings, one at the top, one at the bottom. And what can happen over time is the way that their tensions can come loose. And this is actually easier to demonstrate out of a stand.
Okay.
But what tends to happen, sorry,
so yeah, how do you know that your headset's loose?
So the way you know it is when you pull your brakes and you rock the bike, there's a knock-in. So you can almost like sort of feel a juddering.
You can see it actually moving slightly.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's probably hard for you to see on the camera there, but there is a slight bit of play where it's moving forwards and backwards.
Yeah. Now,
relative to the frame.
Most people sort of like really sort of just end up living with that.
Yeah.
They think, oh, you know, it's my bike, it's making noises, it's making rattling.
So can you live with it?
No.
Why not?
The issue with this is when you have a loose headset, it's going to cause problems for probably the most fundamental part of the bike, which is to do with your steer and the safety of your front fork. If any of that part fails, that could be quite dangerous. So one of the things you want to make sure of is if you do have any play is to be able to tighten up this headset. Now there are several different types of headsets, but most people have this style here. And this style is what we call an A headset.
Right.
So what you have is holding everything in place is a stem and then a top cap here. And what you will have to be able to tighten these up, or to be able to tighten your headset up, you need to be able to do these things in the right order.
Okay.
So first things first, you need to loosen the two bolts of your handlebar stem, this part here. So you only need to loosen them a little bit. So not all the way, they don't need to come out all the way. So just two, they're often opposite on here. What this does is this actually releases the tension on the headset, which sounds like the opposite of what we should be doing, but it then allows us to adjust it by using the Allen key on the top of this top cap here. When you tighten that Allen key, it squeezes the bearings together, and when you squeeze the bearings together, it takes up that play, that knocking that you can sort of feel on there. Okay. So again, you just want this up a little bit until you feel tension.
So the first thing is loosen off the stem bolts.
Correct.
Make sure everything's straight, and then tighten the top bolt.
Tighten the top bolt. Now don't do it up too tight. You only really need to do it up until it takes out that play. So what I suggest you do, if you're not sure, you tighten up a little bit, and then yes, okay, it's going to sort of like obviously go out of alignment like this.
That's no
we
good.
We don't really want to be riding like that. No. But if you pull the brake and then rock it again, you're looking to get rid of that play. So any sort of play. Now, sometimes you don't feel like rocking through here. So in that case, either put your hands along this headset bearing here or down this part here and rock until you feel that that is gone. Okay. Now that's enough. So I've done actually enough on there. So it's taken out the play. So once you've done that, we can leave this bit well alone. We just need to tighten up these two bolts again. Now again, it's important that you do these up properly.
Yeah.
So some of these stems will have a torque setting.
Okay.
So if you do have like a torque meter, it's important to actually use their own sort of like torque settings to tighten those up properly. But normally, what you can do is tighten them up.
If you've got a carbon fork, you don't want to crush it.
No,
so
absolutely.
You do too much torque, tighten them too tightly, you crush it. So.
Yeah. So make sure that your stem is in line with your front wheel. So that's the first thing. So obviously use your eyes. Mine is sometimes wonky, so I do have to take a second opinion and make sure it's aligned up. So obviously if it's not aligned, you'll have your handlebars over here and then you'll be steering over there. So we line that up and then you tighten up the two bolts. Now it's important you do them up equally.
Yep.
So we do 1/2 turn or 1/4 turn of the top one, and then do the same on the bottom one. And then you keep going until effectively you can't do them up anymore. Now, don't do that crazy tight, because this is aluminium and these are steel. What can happen is sometimes one of these will go bang, they'll snap. And the last thing we want to do then is obviously be responsible for you having to actually replace these parts.
So again, like with the other things, there's lots of videos online, and we've got videos online showing you how to do this. But if you're not sure, because safety is an issue, it's worth going to a bike shop and seeing an expert to help you do it if you're not sure.
Anything that you're unsure on.
So now we've sorted the headset. What is the sort of last major thing we should be looking at?
So the last major thing really is to do with the gears.
Okay.
Now, obviously we know that there's a lot of people that ride bikes with only a single gear or a fixed gear, so that might not necessarily apply. But here, what we're looking at is we're looking at the derailleurs. So
do people often have problems common with their gears? You know, what's the typical most common thing you've come across?
So the typical thing is when you go to shift the gear, it doesn't change gear.
Right.
That's often the case. Now, this can happen either with the front or with the rear, or both. Now, the more you use the bike, the more chance there is of neither of them starting or neither of them working, or them not really working as they should do.
And how do we fix this problem? What's normally the cause?
So we've got several reasons that could cause the problem. So your gear systems are complicated, but obviously what you can do is you can troubleshoot. So you can actually go through what might actually be the cause of it. So the first thing that can happen is, especially on a new bike.
Pop it back in this.
Yeah, we can put it back in the stand. So especially with a new bike, I'm just going to move the stand around a little bit.
Let's get it in there. So you say with a new bike, there's a problem that people encounter quite often.
Yes. So with a bike,
I'm just going to turn that bit all like that. Can you get to it there? Move this around. There we go.
Yeah, so every time you shift gear, what you're doing is you're basically pulling on a cable. So when you pull on a cable, over time, that cable will stretch. Okay. There will be a little bit of stretch. And because a gear system really relies on just small little movements of that cable to be able to shift gear, what can happen is as it stretches, it just doesn't shift these derailleurs as much.
So you say that on a new bike, this is more of a problem?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because with a new bike, you have new cables. They might have been pre-stretched in the factory, as they sometimes say, but it still means that there will be stretch that will occur over the first couple of months or so, which is why most bike shops will actually sort of offer a service to take up that play, to adjust those gears if they do go out.
So it's normal if your gears go out on a new bike. It's not, your bike's not got a problem, it's normal.
Yeah.
And how is this remedied then? I'm guessing it's fairly easy to...
So it's a fairly simple, straightforward thing to do. The simplest thing you can actually do yourself is that there are adjusters. Normally on this bike here, this is a lovely little steel frame, we do have adjusters on the frame.
Okay.
So you can just turn these, you can tighten these, so you can pull them out a little bit, literally just like half a turn or a quarter of a turn at a time. And this will just tension the cable up enough to take up that slack to allow the gears to index properly. Now, that's something that you can sort of try and do at home. Again, like you said, there are videos that we have actually created which will show you how to do that. That's a simple thing, but a bit like sort of trying to sort of break a safe, you can go too far.
Yeah.
So it's important that you don't sort of turn it too far, because what can happen is a tiny problem suddenly becomes a much bigger problem.
Yeah.
So the other way you can do it is, especially on the rear derailleur, there is actually another adjuster here that you can use just to really fine tune. So we can just use that to tighten or slacken depending on whether or not the gears are shifting too far one way or too far the other way. So that would be the first thing I would look at doing.
Okay, what would be the next thing you'd look at doing if someone's having trouble with their gears?
So the other things that can happen is basically things wear out.
Okay.
So on a bike that's been used a lot, especially on a commute, what can happen is your chain can sort of start wearing.
Yeah.
And as your chain wears, what will happen is it will actually affect the way that your bike will shift gear.
And what about the cassette as well? Does that as well?
Yeah. So again, this happens if you don't replace that chain when it wears. It's a really, really simple thing to check, and we can have a look at that in a second. But what tends to happen is, over time, your chain stretches. And as it stretches, it will actually wear your cassette teeth. So it will change the way that those teeth work with the chain. And over time, what can happen is those teeth will actually start basically skipping. So it won't hold onto the chain as well.
And changing a chain in a cassette, if they need replacing, it's not that simple a task to do, and you need special tools. So if that is a problem you have with your bike, it is probably best to take it to a shop.
Absolutely. Again, you can normally go to most shops and they'll be able to just check your chain for you. So, you know, they can tell you if it needs replacing, and we'll also be able to tell you if that cassette needs replacing as well. So one thing that can happen is, obviously, if you don't replace those, you can end up with a much bigger bill in the end if you don't replace the chain regularly.
And people might be worried about having that replaced because they might be worried about how much it costs.
Yeah.
But I mean, what would you typically expect for a sort of standard commuter bike? What sort of price should that be?
So it depends on how many gears your bike has got. The rule of thumb is, obviously, the less gears you have, the cheaper it should be. But if you've got sort of like 8 or 9 gears at the back, you could be sort of like looking to pay sort of 10 or 20 pounds for a chain, and potentially sort of like 20 pounds or more for a cassette in the back. So relatively, they're not expensive parts,
especially compared to trains and petrol.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep your bike working, it's something that actually you will expect to have to replace every now and again anyway. They are parts that will wear out.
And what about oiling your chain? It's just a simple thing, but there's a lot of bikes here that look to have quite famished chains.
Yes. So what you will find is people do one of two things. They'll either put too much oil on,
right,
or not enough, as you said. So what tends to happen for people that put too much oil on is they lather it in oil and then think, oh, right, okay, I better put some more on. And before you know it, it's just covered in that black gunk, which is not really good. Other option, if they don't put enough chain oil on, it's really important that you put it on properly. Okay. So obviously at this time of year, wet lube really is the way we go. If you're out and about, it's going to rain. If you don't use a lube that's sort of like